John U. Bacon has authored 14 books on sports, business, and history, the last 7 of which are critically acclaimed national bestsellers, including 5 New York Times bestsellers. He lives in Ann Arbor in northern Michigan with his wife and his son, and we're absolutely delighted to talk about the gales of November this morning. Well, it's a tribute to both the Fitzgerald's captain and the crew. And by the way, it reads like a movie. Straight up, Dre. I'm not going to lie about it. Reads like a movie. It's our absolute pleasure to have John on. John, good morning and congratulations for this accomplishment. And by the way, I have a good feeling that a lot of our listeners are going to want to get their hands on the audiobook version of that. They all drive over the road trucks, and man, there's a lot of people for whom this is their bag. We talked about the anniversary of the song, and people just poured in to talk about that story and their own interpretations of it. So, good morning.
Good morning, Jimmy. Thank you for that. And I think you're right. It's a blue collar story, no question about it. I think of the 29 guys, the older guys, 40s, 50s, and 60s. None of them had gone to college. Some had been dropped out after 8th grade because they're the oldest of 5 kids. It's the Depression, and their dad dies unexpectedly. Guess what? You're 13 years old. You got to earn a living, incredibly. So, and yet these guys taught themselves how to pass the test for the engine room, for the pilot house, and so on. These are very tough Coast Guard tests. They got their textbooks out. They're self-educated. It's just a very impressive bunch. And what is true of so many, I think, workers, including, of course, the truckers you're talking to, in some ways, it's an invisible industry. Our stuff comes from these ships, the cement in your basement, the car in your driveway, the food in your table, and yet we know almost nothing about it. So that felt good to tell that part of the story even before we get to, of course, the tragic night of November 10th, 1975.
It's interesting, too, because it is 1975, 50 years ago, is a strange snapshot of America. It is America. You could actually call the 70s
True.
in regards to manufacturing and the economy a real liminal space where we go from a producer to a consumer. That is the space in which it happens, and in many ways, it's a callback to an earlier era while beginning to see the cracks in the infrastructure. I don't mean the roads, but the actual infrastructure of what American manufacturing means, and you can see it in the story of this ship, and it can't help but keep percolating to the surface of that Great Lake, right?
That's well said, by the way, and that's all kind of true. So, of course, people know about the arsenal of democracy during World War II, which is, and it comes from these ships. You got to get the iron from Minnesota, northern Minnesota, across Lake Superior, down the Sioux Locks, a very narrow passage, because Lake Superior drops 21 feet to Lake Huron, so had to go through the Sioux Locks. And then to Detroit, Toledo, Cleveland, and so on. That's to build bombers and tanks and you name it, all the stuff you need for World War II. That iron built one B-24 Liberator bomber every hour on the hour for 3 years. And that's Rosie the Riveter and everyone else, of course, so was doing that. So that's how big that was. 1945 to 1975, the Great Lakes were really the Silicon Valley before Silicon Valley. It had incredible power. 5 of the most populated 7 states were on the Great Lakes. Only Texas and California were outside it. And here's a fun fact for you, Jimmy. Name the Great Lakes city in 1960 census that was bigger than Miami, Nashville, Tennessee, right in your backyard, of course, Jacksonville, Tampa, and San Jose, California. And the answer, incredibly, is Toledo, Ohio.
I knew it. I knew it. It's just everybody's always kind of stunned. In 1975, if you'd asked people famous cities in Ohio, it would have been at the top of the list. And it's amazing how much more reduced that is in people's brains. You ask kids now, they can't think of Toledo. I mean, Toledo, like growing up in the 60s or 70s, Toledo was Ohio for a lot of people, right? I mean, the center.
People I talked to said if you're going on vacation in the 60s or 70s, you didn't go drive an hour to Detroit to the airport to go to Florida. You flew out of Toledo. It had that kind of power. So anyway, but it's definitely a story. Someone said this is a love letter to the Great Lakes and the men who worked on it. And you know what? If that's the case, I'll take it.
I agree with it, by the way. And one of the things that you have to do in the book, and it's really cool because a lot of our listeners, by the way, I'm telling you guys, we get a lot of great books on here, John, and we read them all. But I'm telling you, I got about halfway through this when I was in the middle of it, and I said there isn't a single one of our listeners, especially the guys who drive the border routes and the ones who drive out of the now Mideast, formerly Midwest states, who isn't going to love this.
Right.
But you have to do the same thing. Anybody telling a good story about the road has to tell a story about the road. Anybody telling a good story about the Edmund Fitzgerald has to tell a good story about the lake on which it happened. And you actually, in telling this story, create the character of all of the lakes, but then specify where the incident takes place and do a deep dive, pun intended, into that particular body of water, right? Explain to me how you actually are able to personify a lake while at the same time not letting it get clever or cheeky. You've got to create a character so that we understand when this all starts going down in the second half of the book exactly what's happening. I will let you wax.
Well, thank you very much, Jimmy. Look, I grew up on the Great Lakes. I've been in all 5 of them. I've sailed on a couple of them in actual sailboats. When we say sailing for these guys, we mean freighters, not wind sails. But anyway, and I was amazed how little I knew. So these things are gigantic. The 5 of them combined are bigger than Rhode Island, Connecticut, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Vermont, the state of Maine, and the state of New York. That's how big they are. Lake Superior itself is bigger than the island of Ireland. It's just that big. It's just crazy. You cannot see across these things, not because of the fog or the mist, because of the curvature of the earth. They're just too big. It's like looking across a state. You can't do it. So anyway, that's how big these things are. What I really didn't know, and this just stunned me, when I talked to experienced Great Lakes sailors, guys who've done 12 years, for example, on the Atlantic and 23 on the Great Lakes, they said consistently that the Great Lakes are more dangerous than the Atlantic. And I said, how can that possibly be true? And they explained it, that the salt water on the oceans blunts the waves. On the Great Lakes, they're sharp and pointy like a mountain range. On the ocean, they're soft and smooth because the salt water weighs them down and spreads them out. So on the Atlantic Ocean, they're 10 to 16 seconds apart. On the Great Lakes, they're 4 to 8 seconds apart. And more importantly, on the ocean, the waves you're seeing are generated from storms 500, 1,000 miles away. On the Great Lakes, they're what's called locally occurring storms. And I asked one of my experts, what does that mean? He said, it's over your damn head. So, okay, that's what it means. I get it. Thank you. It just turns and turns so fast, and it does on Fitz's last run as well. It's 70 degrees in Duluth, Minnesota when they leave on November 9th, 1975. That is unbelievably warm. That time of year, you can wear T-shirts, play golf, etc. And, of course, that changes so fast. So for all these reasons, this can be more dangerous. You can get the bow of your ship on the Great Lakes stuck in one 30-foot wave, and then 700 feet later, because that's how long these ships were, that's how long the Fitz was, you can have your stern stuck in a second 30-foot wave with nothing supporting all that weight in between. All that weight is 26,000 tons of taconite or iron ore. That's the same as 4,200 elephants, adult elephants. That's how crazy that is. So guess what? It's going to sag in the middle when it goes between those waves. Then it's going to go over one of those waves and it's going to do what's called hogging, which is draping itself over that wave. Then it sags, then it hogs, then it sags, then it hogs. Well, take a paper clip and bend it back and forth 10,000 times. This is how many waves you see on the Great Lakes in one day. And it's going to snap. And that's what happened to the Bradley in 1958 and the Morel in 1966. These are gigantic steel ships that cracked in half. And it might have happened to the Fitz as well. So that alone, you get your respect for these guys. It's a hard life. They're on the ship for 9 months out of the year. And no anniversaries, no weddings. So even if a sailor lived next to you, you'd never meet the guy. He's on a ship. So one of the guys said, you know what? I love my 3 kids. I didn't teach any of them how to ride a bike or throw a baseball. That's how heartbreaking some of this is. Flip side is when he finished the season, he'd come home and his kids would run up to him and give him a big old hug and say, Daddy, Daddy, you smell like a truck. And he would say, no, I smell like a paycheck. Big difference.
I got to tell you, I'm reading the early part of the book, and look, we live on Lake Pontchartrain, because we got
Oh, nice.
one studio in Nashville and one studio down here in New Orleans. Let me tell you something, my brother. It's like I tell my nephew all the time. We drive out to the middle of Lake Pontchartrain on that 26-mile causeway, and I said, you could fit a whole lot of these in the middle of any of those ones up there. But I was not familiar with the concept of the dreaded Three Sisters. And when I got to that, I was like, oh my God. I mean, the idea, too, that you can go out into a lake and have one whole large. Okay, all right. I'm trying to make sense of this in a way that I actually can articulate. And you said, that some of the lakes are bigger than actually the Ireland, which means they are different states. I mean, that there are different. You almost have to divide the lakes up into certain areas to figure out which ones are the ones that are calm kind of places and which ones are dangerous places. This is not a matter of a lake. This is a series of different territorial areas inside of a large body of water for a lot of these lakes, right?
Oh, exactly right. I mean, consider for a moment that Lake Superior is about the same size as the state of Virginia. The state of Virginia can have a storm in the north and beautiful weather in the south, and that's what happens in these lakes as well. They're that big. And by the way, also, I know you got a lot of truckers and so on. The ships did not work in competition with the trucks. They worked in harmony with them, because these are the guys that deliver the stuff to the leader, Cleveland, and it's trucks that take them away. Trucks and trains take it all away. So that's how you get your stuff. So it all works together.
It's a very intermodal system that actually, at the height of World War II, as you talked about, the great arsenal of democracy was one big flow from the water to the train, to the train, to the yard, to the yard, to the truck, to the truck, to the factory, and then back on the factory when the product was completed, and on and on and on. Okay, so we've kind of set the stage for what this world is, and I don't want to give away the entire game. People know how the story ends, but it's the particulars, because the second thing you have to do is create a mosaic of characters. And you would think for such a singular incident, and the reason I brought up the kind of development of the lake is that the deep diving to make sure you got so many of these stories done right. Talk to me a bit about process, about making sure that you honor the men and honor their stories by going as deep as you possibly can and creating some kind of balance. There are people that stand out and others that kind of recede based on their character, but talk to me about how you put together this mosaic of humanity on that giant ship in that even bigger lake.
Well, appreciate that, Jimmy. And look, my previous books, as you said earlier, are often about college football or hockey. I deal with a lot of celebrities, a lot of big names and so on. Those guys have all been very good to me, no question about it. These guys aren't rich, they're not famous, and I really, really love honoring them in this book. That was my main goal when I set out. Yes, I wanted to find out why the ship went down. It's still a mystery, and we clear up some things, but you still can't quite solve it. But what drove me, and it's what you talked about, the 29 men. I knew there's 29 from the song. I didn't know anything else. I didn't know any names. I didn't know what their jobs were like, what their lives were like on deck, on the ship, what their lives were like on shore as they travel. What are their families like? Where do they live? What is all that about? And in the process, man, I felt like I met some really great guys. No nonsense, hardworking guys. And as I said, the Midwest has not got a fancy code of conduct like chivalry in the South. But
I can't hear you.
Ones that, oh, sorry. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
It was on me. It was on me, John. Sorry, not on you. On me.
Oh, okay.
We were sitting down a guest, and my headset got pulled out. So you've been doing fine. You're great.
All right. Sorry, listeners. We're okay. But anyway, if the Midwest had a code, it'd be very simple. Know your job, do your job, no whining, and leave it better than you found it. That's a pretty good blue collar code right there for anybody, really. That's what these guys did. So you got Eddie Bindon. Eddie Bindon was a 47-year-old first assistant engineer on the ship. Very good at what he did. I got to 6 former crewmen who'd been on the ship and knew these guys, and obviously did not go down with the ship. This is before the tragedy. Who could talk knowledgeably about these guys 52, 53 years later. So Eddie Bindon, great guy, quiet, protected, now a friend of mine, Patrick Devine, who was 22 at the time. Just a really good guy, married for 25 years, no kids. So this is going to be his last trip. So the day before they took off on Sunday, November 9th, he goes next door from Superior, Wisconsin to Duluth, Minnesota. They're sister cities, basically, or twin cities. He buys a 2-carat diamond ring for his wife for the anniversary. He's going to retire after this trip. He wraps a love note around it. But instead of stuffing that in his duffel bag, he gives it to a friend of his and says, please mail this to my wife. And who knows why he did that? Who can say? She's going to see him in the dock in 3 days in Toledo when his career ends. But his friend mails it. Of course, the ship goes down. And 3 or 4 days later, Helen Bindon, in the mail, receives a 2-carat diamond ring from her husband and a love note. And she wore that the rest of her life, and she never remarried. So those are the kind of stories I found in my research.
Yeah, it is just it just begins to accumulate, and I kept thinking about it's impossible for anybody who actually knows Lightfoot's song. It's impossible to escape. Boys, it's been good to know you. And I kept thinking about that line throughout the course of meeting each one of these people. And you said that you met a lot of great people along the way, and I understand what you mean. The idea that, of course, as you begin to really flesh out these characters and pay them the historical honor they need to be paid, you get to know them. And I was kind of curious from an emotional place, John, did you begin to feel the weight of that sadness of what was lost that night on the ship?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, it's sad enough when you hear the song, 29 men went down. When you find out that Nolan Church in his 50s left the factory to hop on a ship to be a porter, which is kind of the waiter / maitre d' of the ship. And he loved it, and he's got 5 kids at home, but this is his dream, and he couldn't be happier. And his granddaughter is due on November 13th. And then, of course, the ship goes down on November 10th. How does that not break your heart? Sadly, the more you can know these guys and their lives, the more heartbreaking the whole thing is. And yet, these people are incredibly resilient. The company that leased the ship, Ogilvy Norton, did very little for these people when the ship went down. They didn't call anybody. They didn't return calls. They didn't answer the phone. It was really cruel, frankly. And they paid out as little as they possibly could. So you might have gotten a year's salary. Well, your dad has got a family at home of 7 kids in Mockwell, Wisconsin, in the case of the Wilhelms.
It gutted me. It gutted me. It gutted me. And it's like, and I kept thinking about, like I said, that great liminal transitional point. I just kept thinking about the kind of the bottom line and the prioritization of stockholders and shareholders. And I just kept thinking about why so many people, when the 70s malaise really kicks in, so much of it was that so many people felt betrayed by companies they had worked for forever. And so much of that is contained in this book. It's a snapshot of one incident, and yet it kind of looms large throughout the entire thing. Before we actually get back to the book, JohnUBacon.com. That's John Bacon, BACON.com. You guys know John, by the way. I know him very well. I loved his book, Fourth and Long, The Fight for the Soul of College Football, written in 2013. It is incredibly relevant even today. There's a whole other lot of great stuff. Head over there. I know, John, you must feel kind of vindicated after that book, what's going on right now. I mean, I'm going to straight up say
Sadly,
it.
yes.
I mean, sadly, yes. I mean, there has been some green shoots about it, but at least in this case, the people who've been exploited are finally getting a little bit of money. Let's talk about
True.
Let's talk a little bit about lessons that you feel like that people can learn from the book, because there's all kinds of values I think that people can actually draw from the book about the character of these men and the decisions that were made by people who never risked their lives in the way that they have. But can you talk a little bit about some of your own insights without, like I said, once again, I want people to read this. It reads like a freight train or, like something moving very fast on the sea. But talk a little bit about that in regards to what you think we can learn from this moment in history.
Well, sure. As far as college athletics go, or
no, I'm sorry, no, not college athletics. I mean the book, Edmund Fitzgerald. Sorry, I just shifted to kind of promote the other book.
Things.
Yeah.
One is that that we got a lot of unsung heroes out there, and that's what these guys were. My view is these guys are heroes before November 10th, 1975. We rely on them for all our stuff. Same with the truckers, same with the trains. Of course, this is how we get our stuff, and people, devote the best years of their lives to providing this for us. As Samuel Johnson said centuries ago, it's not fish you're buying, it's men's lives. And it's kind of true. And in this case, of course, it's tragically true. One is that these guys had about 22 older guys who had fought in World War II, fought in the Korean War, often highly decorated. And you had some young bucks who were between 20 and 22 years old who were on the ship in part to avoid Vietnam, which in 1925 is probably not a bad idea. And yet they got along amazingly well. McSorley was the captain, Ernest McSorley, and they all said the same thing. That man was the fairest man I knew. If you did your job and look out for your fellow man, then he was okay with you. He didn't care about the long hair, the lamb chops, or the bell bottoms. He said, just as long as you keep your damn hair out of the machine. That's all you have to do. So these guys got along very well. I'm sure the politics were arranged. And the idea of getting along that well, of judging ourselves on the job we do and so on, is not a bad idea in this era. So how these guys got along is impressive, and how these families, after the ship went down, the crew was unusually close. And I talked to guys who were on that crew that summer as proof. But when the ship went down, these families, about 1/3 Duluth, 1/3 Toledo, 1/3 Cleveland, about 9 in each place. They didn't know each other at all. They didn't know their names, no addresses, no phone numbers, and people, no cell phone or laptops back then either. So there you are. They, through anniversaries, through the effort to get the bell brought up from 530 feet down, the effort to get the Canadian government, because it's just barely in Canadian waters, to get them to declare the wreckage a national and international grave site, they became incredibly close. And as one of the women who's Wilhelm's 6th of 7 kids, she was 12 at the time, as she said, the people at this table tonight, and this is when we were together 3 years ago, the other families, she said, they're not like family, they are family, because who else could know what I've been through? And McSorley's last words on the ship were, we are holding our own. In other words, we're going to deal with our problems, we'll get through it. Well, these families did. And then Heidi's daughter, born on the 23rd anniversary of the tragedy, the night that her grandfather she'll never meet was lost. She was born on that date. On her 21st birthday in 2019, she got a tattoo. And Heidi Wilhelm said, Sarah, show John your tattoo. She pulls up her sleeve on her hoodie on her left arm, and it says in carefully written letters, we are holding our own. And these people really are, and it's impressive.
Just to kind of give you a sense of what is in store for you guys, if you in fact pick up this book, McSorley had less ego than most captains, but he still had his pride. If the Fitzgerald could no longer dominate the record books, McSorley's competitive instincts found new targets, breaking the Fitzgerald's own records year after year, making record profits for the company, and burnishing the Fitzgerald's reputation among fans and other crews as the best ship on the Great Lakes. McSorley had no intention of letting the Fitz lose her sterling status on his or his own on his watch. John, I can't thank you enough for making time for us today. I also want to ask, I'll always leave a little bit of time as we were talking about the Gales of November, the untold story of the Edmund Fitzgerald. You do actually take some time to kind of unpack the song as well, do you not, sir?
Yeah, and you know what? God bless Gordon Lightfoot, who passed away 2.5 years ago. He took it very seriously. He was very moved by what happened. He did his homework. That song is like 97% accurate. And he became very close to the families also. They knew him. They'd go backstage. He gave money for scholarships in the deceased name. He comes out as a real hero in this story, no question about it. So,
yeah, I was deeply
honest,
moved.
Jimmy, ditto. And without him, there's no book. Without the song, there's no book.
I'm going to tell you something really cool. If you get a chance, by the way, and one of my, I guess I would call it a guilty pleasure, is watching people listen to songs for the first time on YouTube. A lot of kids, people under 30, and I'm sorry to kind of phrase it that way, but a lot of people who have no memory of this. And there is a wonderful aggregate video of the entire song with all of these different people in separate rooms listening to it for the first time. And watching those young people, some of them 21, some of them 28, 29, 30, but watching all of them as the story goes on, deeply moved by it in this modern era, is a great reminder that you're right, that song, the opening line, the legend lives on from the Chippewa on down on the big banks they call Gitchagumi. And that opening line is a reminder that sometimes a balladeer, as we talked about on the show a couple of weeks ago, is often the impetus for something even larger, richer, deeper, and at the same time complementary. John, I can't thank you enough. Thank you for making the time. What are you working on next? What you got cooking?
Dude, I'm in Minneapolis right now. I'm still on the book tour till the 15th of December, and I'll probably be doing some more trips, including perhaps Texas, in 2026. That's all on johnubaking.com. How to order the book almost anywhere, through Amazon, Barnes & Noble, your local bookstore. and what the book tour is going to be. But the people have been great, and Hollywood is coming calling, so we'll see what they have to say as well.
I can't wait, by the way. You deserve it, by the way. The book is terrific. And also, guys, go over to johnubaconbooks.com and look up all the books. I think you know him. You guys know John. The work is pretty comprehensive. And by the way, anybody who can write about football and keep it fast and moving can certainly handle this kind of material as well. Thank you, John. Appreciate you.